I never thought my life would unravel the way it did. For years, I believed that family was a safe harbor, a place where love and respect were automatic, unconditional. But that illusion shattered one ordinary afternoon, an afternoon that began like any other, and ended with me questioning everything I thought I knew about my son, my home, and even myself. My son, Daniel, was my pride and joy. From the moment he was born, I poured my heart and soul into raising him, sacrificing things I didn't even know I was sacrificing. I skipped nights, worked extra hours, endured endless stress just so he could have every opportunity I didn't. I never thought I would need to beg for his love, or worse, see it manipulated by someone else. It all began when he met Vanessa. She was charming, smart, polished, the kind of woman you'd imagine winning over anyone. I'll admit I liked her at first. She had a way of laughing that lit up a room, and she spoke to me as if she respected me. But there were tiny cracks, tiny moments that hinted at something beneath her perfect smile. The first red flag was subtle, a casual remark, almost playful, about how I spoiled Daniel. I laughed it off at the time, thinking it was harmless teasing. But soon, those small digs became a pattern. Little comments here and there, questioning my decisions, mocking my opinions, or subtly undermining my advice. And Daniel, he started listening. He started agreeing. I noticed the shift slowly. At first, it was minor things. He began canceling our Sunday lunches, forgetting to call when he said he would, brushing off my advice as old-fashioned. At the time, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too strict, too involved. But deep down, a gnawing feeling told me something else was at play. Then came the day that changed everything. Daniel called me with a nervous tone I didn't recognize. Mom Vanessa and I were talking and, well, we think it is better if you don't get involved in our finances anymore, he said. I froze. Excuse me? My voice trembled. We just need to make our own decisions. UV helped us for so long, but it is time we manage our own money, he said. He sounded hesitant, but I knew Vanessa's voice had been guiding those words. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. It was like someone had shoved a knife into my heart. All those years of helping, guiding, supporting, was this what it amounted to? I tried to reason with him. Daniel, I've always done this because I love you, because I want what's best for you. Isn't it that what a mother is supposed to do? I know, Mom, I know. But Vanessa thinks it is better this way, he replied. His voice had an edge now, a subtle distance that I had never heard before. And that was the beginning. The beginning of a long, painful spiral that left me questioning not just my relationship with my son, but everything I thought I had built in my life. I remember sitting alone that night, staring at the wall, wondering where I went wrong. Had I been too controlling, too emotional, too naive? The truth was, I hadn't done anything wrong, at least not in my heart, but the way Vanessa had turned him against me made it feel like I was the villain in my own life story. Over the next few weeks, the subtle manipulation became more pronounced. Vanessa would call me, her voice sweet and polite, masking the venom beneath. She'd ask questions about our family, about Daniel, about my routines, always probing, always looking for ways to twist the narrative. And Daniel, my son, he was no longer the boy who ran into my arms for comfort. He started defending her comments, justifying her behavior, and questioning my intentions. I felt a storm inside me, grief, anger, disbelief, and a terrifying sense of helplessness. How could my own child turn against me like this? How could someone so dear manipulate him so completely? And yet, deep down, a small part of me refused to break. I knew I had to endure, to be patient, to watch and wait. Because in life, As in karma, there is a balance. And I had a feeling, though I couldn't see it yet, that balance would find its way back to me. That feeling kept me going through sleepless nights and tense conversations. I began keeping notes of everything: phone calls, financial decisions, offhand comments, lies, and manipulations. I wasn't naive anymore. I wasn't just a mother being hurt by her son. I was a mother who was going to see the truth, no matter how long it took. By the time Daniel and Vanessa formally excluded me from family decisions, I had already started planning. Not revenge, not confrontation, just clarity. I would protect myself. I would protect my dignity. And eventually karma would make its presence known. I just didn't know yet how devastating, how beautifully ironic it would be. The weeks after Daniel and Vanessa formally distanced themselves from me felt like walking through a storm that refused to break. Every interaction was colored with tension, every call a battlefield, every visit a trial. Vanessa had a way of making me feel small, invisible, and even guilty for being a mother. It started with small things. Daniel began canceling visits at the last minute, offering excuses that were too rehearsed to be real. Work ran late, or Vanessa and I need some time together. The words themselves weren't a cruel, but the tone detached, almost indifferent, cut deeper than any insult could. Then came the subtle digs, the insinuations. Vanessa would comment on my home, my wardrobe, even the way I cooked. "Mom, maybe you should update this recipe. Daniel doesn't like it as much," she said once, her voice sugary, her smile fake. My heart sank, but I forced a polite laugh. I knew better than to respond with anger in front of her. She thrived on my emotional reactions. What broke me the most, though, wasn't her comments, it was Daniel S. responses. Every time Vanessa spoke, Daniel nodded, agreed, and added his own reasoning, often defending her in a way that made me feel invisible. I began to realize that the man who had once relied on me for advice, comfort, and guidance now saw me as a critic, or, worse, an obstacle. One evening, I received a text that shattered the fragile stability I had clung to. It was from Vanessa, but she sent it through Daniel. "Mom, Daniel and I have decided it's best if you don't get involved in our family matters. We appreciate everything, but it's time to step back. Love, Vanessa." I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my chest tightening, my mind screaming. I couldn't believe what I was reading. After all I had done, all the sacrifices, the nights I spent worrying, all the love I poured into my son, this was the message I received? A cold, impersonal text? I wanted to call, to scream, to beg, but I didn't. I had learned my lessons the hard way. Vanessa was a master manipulator, and any emotional outburst would only be twisted into ammunition against me. Instead, I sat quietly, letting the anger, hurt, and disbelief simmer. And simmer it did. Every day, I watched as their world flourished without me. Daniel seemed happier, more confident, more distant. Vanessa's influence was evident in everything he did. I realized with a painful clarity that she had systematically replaced my voice in his life with her own. But what Vanessa didn't know, what Daniel didn't suspect, was that I was quietly observing, documenting, and preparing. I kept a meticulous record of everything: financial transactions, suspicious behaviors, the lies they told me, and the contradictions in their stories. I was no longer just a mother being hurt. I was a strategist, quietly waiting for the right moment. Then came the first real crack in their armor, though I didn't know it at the time. It was a simple misstep, something that seemed insignificant at first but would later prove to be monumental. Vanessa had a habit of boasting about her control over Daniel, her ability to manipulate him with just a few words. One evening, she let something slip, a comment about taking advantage of a family inheritance. She laughed it off, but the words stuck in my mind like nails. I began to investigate, carefully, discreetly. I reached out to a few distant relatives, quietly checking details about finances, properties, and legal matters. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Vanessa wasn't just controlling my son emotionally, she was systematically isolating him from me and positioning herself to take advantage of everything we had worked for. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was a calculated attack, designed to sever the bond between mother and son and strip me of the respect, love, and influence I had earned over decades. And for the first time, I understood the full scope of the battle ahead. Yet, in that realization, something else began to stir, a sense of calm, a quiet resolve. I wouldn't react rashly. I wouldn't plead or cry. I would let karma, truth, and patience do the work. And I would make sure that when the moment came, the consequences of their arrogance would hit them hard. Still, living day to day under the shadow of their manipulations was exhausting. Every interaction required calculation, every word measured. But I refused to give in to despair. I reminded myself, I had raised Daniel. I knew him better than anyone, and no matter how clever Vanessa thought she was, there were limits to how much a mother's love and a child's conscience could be suppressed. The turning point of that chapter came one evening during a casual dinner. I had been invited reluctantly, with Vanessa insisting that it would be nice for family to get together. I agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to observe, to gather evidence, to understand how far things had gone. Daniel barely looked at me. Vanessa dominated the conversation, asking leading questions, subtly undermining anything I said. But then, something unexpected happened. In a quiet moment, Daniel dropped his guard. He muttered something about a financial decision Vanessa had made, something that didn't sit right with him. I caught it, and in that moment, I realized he wasn't completely under her spell. There was still a part of him that remembered who had been there for him all along. That tiny crack, that small flicker of doubt in Daniel's eyes, became my lifeline. It reminded me that even in the darkest moments, truth has a way of surfacing. Even the strongest manipulations leave traces of vulnerability. And it was in those traces that I would eventually find my way back, stronger than ever. As I left that dinner, heart heavy but mind alert, I made a silent vow. I would endure, I would observe, and when the time was right, justice, silent, unstoppable, and perfect, would find its way into their lives. I always knew life had a way of balancing itself, even when it seemed impossible. But nothing could have prepared me for the subtle, almost poetic way karma began to creep into our lives. It didn't announce itself loudly, it was quiet, precise, and undeniably satisfying. It started with a minor incident, something that seemed insignificant at first. Vanessa had insisted on taking over a major financial decision, an investment she claimed would secure our future. Daniel, trusting her judgment blindly, followed along without consulting anyone. Within weeks, the so-called secure investment began to show cracks. Small, overlooked fees multiplied, promises of high returns vanished, and suddenly, what was meant to consolidate her control over Daniel started slipping through her fingers. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I simply watched. I had learned that patience was the deadliest weapon. Vanessa's frustration began to show tiny slips in her polished demeanor. She grew sharper, more defensive, more desperate to assert dominance. And in those moments, Daniel started noticing things, little inconsistencies, moments where Vanessa's perfect plans didn't add up. One evening, Daniel called me. His tone was cautious, almost hesitant. "Mom, can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. I could hear the subtle tremor in his voice, the uncertainty that hadn't been there for months. I agreed immediately, and when he arrived, I could see the confusion written across his face. I. I don't understand, he admitted, sitting down across from me. Vanessa made some decisions, and well, things aren't working out the way she promised. I feel lost. I held his gaze, fighting back tears. Daniel, you've always been strong. You've always known how to see through things when you trust your instincts. You're not lost, you just need clarity. And for the first time in months, Daniel really listened. He asked questions, hesitated before agreeing, and slowly the layers of manipulation began to unravel. I didn't need to push. I simply reminded him of what he already knew in his heart. That little flicker of doubt I had noticed weeks ago was now turning into a spark of clarity. Meanwhile, Vanessa's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She had always relied on control, charm, and intimidation, but as her schemes began to falter, cracks appeared. She made mistakes small, careless mistakes, but they were enough to reveal her intentions. I noticed the tension in her voice during phone calls, the impatience in her tone, the forced sweetness that couldn't hide her frustration. It was during one particularly tense family dinner that the first public sign of her unraveling occurred. Vanessa tried to assert dominance as usual, commenting on our home, subtly criticizing my choices. But Daniel, for the first time in months, interrupted her politely but firmly. "Vanessa, that is not true," he said, looking directly at her. "Ivy realized some things, and I think we need to rethink how we read doing this." Her face flushed, her perfectly rehearsed smile faltering. I watched quietly, letting the scene play out. For months, she had believed she was untouchable, that she could bend my son to her will completely. And now, her grip was slipping. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Daniel began questioning her advice, seeking my perspective again. Vanessa tried to maintain her control, but every attempt was met with subtle resistance. And as her frustration grew, so did the cracks in their relationship. Arguments erupted over minor decisions, tensions that were once invisible now exposed for everyone to see. During this period, I continued my quiet observations. I documented every misstep, every lie, every small betrayal. But I also began gently guiding Daniel, reminding him of the values I had instilled in him, helping him reconnect with his intuition, his moral compass. I didn't push, never push, but I planted seeds. Seeds that would grow in their own time. And then, karma delivered its first major blow. Vanessa, in her desperation to assert dominance, made a critical mistake. She attempted to manipulate Daniel into transferring control of a significant family asset, something she had coveted for months. But Daniel, now more aware, questioned her reasoning. He checked the details, reviewed the documents, and discovered that she had misrepresented the facts. The realization hit Daniel like a thunderbolt. The woman he had trusted completely, the woman he had believed loved him unconditionally, had been deceiving him. I watched silently as the weight of this truth settled on him. And for the first time, I saw the confusion, anger, and hurt mirrored in his eyes, the very emotions I had felt when I realized he had been turned against me. That night, Daniel sat beside me, silent for long moments. Finally, he whispered, almost ashamed, "Mom, I didn't see it before. I let her manipulate me. I let her come between us." I reached for his hand, holding it firmly. "Daniel, it's okay. What matters is that you see it now, that you understand. We can rebuild together." It wasn't just a moment of realization for Daniel. It was a turning point. The scales of manipulation had begun to tilt, and Vanessa's power, the power she had so carefully cultivated, was beginning to crumble. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply felt a quiet sense of justice settling in. The universe has a way of correcting imbalance, and now, for the first time, I saw it happening before my eyes. The weeks that followed were tense but revealing. Arguments became frequent between Daniel and Vanessa. Her attempts to dominate and control became more desperate, more transparent. Daniel, now armed with clarity and confidence, began standing up for himself and, implicitly, for me. And while the wounds of the past months were still raw, I knew the tide had shifted. By the end of that chapter, I understood a crucial truth. No matter how deep the manipulation, no matter how clever the deceit, the bonds of family, trust, and love cannot be completely severed. Karma doesn't need to strike with thunder, it works quietly, invisibly, but inexorably. And in their unraveling, I realized that patience, resilience, and unwavering love had been my allies all along. By now, the tension in our household had reached a boiling point. Vanessa had spent months weaving her web of control, subtly isolating my son from me, convincing him to see me as an obstacle rather than a mother who had always loved him unconditionally. But the careful structure she had built was beginning to crumble, piece by piece, and I could see the cracks forming in real time. It started with small arguments between her and Daniel, arguments that had never existed before. She grew increasingly impatient, snapping over minor disagreements, her once perfect composure faltering. Daniel, for the first time, was no longer passive. He questioned her decisions, hesitated before agreeing with her, and sought my counsel again, carefully, almost tentatively. The first major incident happened on a Saturday afternoon. Vanessa had insisted on handling a large family transaction without consulting Daniel or me. She claimed it was too complicated for anyone else, that only she could manage it. But her calculations were sloppy. The numbers didn't add up. Contracts were incomplete. And, most importantly, her deceit months of hidden agendas began to surface. Daniel called me in a panic. "Mom, I don't understand. I trusted her. And now things are wrong. Very wrong." His voice trembled, but this time it wasn't confusion, it was the dawning realization of betrayal. I stayed calm. Calmness was my weapon. I guided him carefully, step by step, showing him where Vanessa had misrepresented information, explaining how her manipulations had influenced his decisions. Daniel listened quietly, the weight of truth slowly settling on him. He was angry, hurt, but most importantly, he began to see clearly. Meanwhile, Vanessa's behavior deteriorated rapidly. Her confidence cracked into desperation. I noticed it in her voice on phone calls, in the way she addressed me with forced politeness that barely masked irritation. Every manipulation she tried to pull backfired. Every lie she had spun started to unravel, revealing the truth to Daniel. Then came the dinner that would mark the breaking point. Vanessa, ever determined to assert dominance, began criticizing me openly in front of Daniel. She mocked my advice, my decisions, even my past sacrifices, in a tone dripping with false sweetness. I felt the old familiar ache in my chest, the sting of betrayal, but I refused to rise to her bait. Instead, I stayed silent. I let her words hang in the air. And Daniel spoke. "Vanessa, that's enough," he said, his voice steady but firm. "I've been blind, and I see now what has been happening. I realize how much my mother has done for me, how much she has always cared. And I want to let you manipulate me anymore." The look on Vanessa's face was priceless shock, disbelief, and then panic. Her carefully curated mask fell apart. I could almost see the realization dawning on her. Her control was gone, and she had underestimated the bond between mother and son. From that moment on, the dynamics shifted dramatically. Daniel began restoring our relationship, asking questions, seeking advice, and opening up to me in ways he hadn't in months. He admitted mistakes he had made, confessed how easily he had been swayed, and expressed a deep remorse for turning against me. Vanessa, desperate to salvage her influence, tried to manipulate him again, but it was too late. Daniel now had clarity, awareness, and most importantly, a renewed sense of loyalty to his mother. Every attempt she made to regain control only highlighted her deceit, pushing him further away. I watched quietly, with a mixture of relief and restrained satisfaction. Karma, in its quiet, deliberate way, had begun to exact its toll. Vanessa's schemes, her manipulations, lies, and deceit were crumbling under the weight of truth and patience. In the weeks that followed, she attempted to isolate Daniel, again, but he refused. He questioned every decision she made, verified facts, and involved me in discussions once more. Slowly, the balance of power shifted. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate loudly. I simply observed, guided, and let the natural consequences of her actions take their course. And then came the final, undeniable moment of reckoning. Vanessa, in a desperate bid to assert control, attempted a major financial maneuver without Daniel's consent, something that could have cost him dearly. But Daniel, now informed and alert, stopped her. He confronted her with facts, exposed her deceit, and demanded accountability. Her face turned pale. She stuttered, tried to justify herself, but it was too late. Daniel was no longer under her influence, and in that moment I realized the battle was over. Not with anger, not with confrontation, but with patience, truth, and unwavering love. The universe had restored balance. That night, as I sat alone, I reflected on everything. The months of pain, the betrayal, the emotional turmoil. It had been a test. One that forced me to endure, observe, and remain patient. And the lesson was clear. No manipulation, no matter how clever, can overcome truth, love, and resilience. Daniel came to me, hugging me tightly, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I was wrong. I should have trusted you from the start. I see now how much you've done for me. Thank you for never giving up on me." And in that embrace, I felt a profound sense of vindication, not for me, but for the bond that had been tested, strained, and nearly broken, yet had survived. Karma had not only acted on Vanessa, but had also healed the fractures between my son and me. From that day forward, our relationship slowly but surely returned to what it had once been, a relationship of trust, love, and mutual respect. Vanessa, no longer able to manipulate or control, retreated, her schemes exposed and powerless. And I, a mother who had endured betrayal and heartbreak, had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever. I had waited months for this moment, the moment when the storm of betrayal, manipulation, and heartbreak would finally calm, leaving clarity, truth, and justice in its place. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, deliberate, and deeply satisfying, the kind of karma that arrives, not with fanfare, but with perfect timing. Daniel and I had begun rebuilding our relationship slowly. He asked questions, sought guidance, and listened not just to my words, but to the wisdom embedded in every experience I had shared with him over the years. Vanessa, once so confident, now hovered on the edge of irrelevance, her influence gone. Every lie, every manipulation she had attempted had left a trail she couldn't erase, and Daniel finally saw it all clearly. One afternoon, I received a call from Daniel. His voice was warm, almost tender, a stark contrast to the cold, distant tones of months past. "Mom, I want to thank you," he said, "not just for standing by me, but for never giving up. I see now how much you love me, how much you've always protected me even when I didn't understand. I, I want to make things right." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I swallowed them. Instead, I smiled softly. "Daniel, it is never too late to rebuild. What matters is that we move forward together, honestly, and with love. And that's exactly what we did. We spent weeks reconnecting, sharing stories, laughing, and even crying together. He admitted his mistakes, expressed remorse for doubting me, and promised to never let anyone come between us again. It was a quiet restoration, but one that filled the cracks left by months of emotional turmoil. As for Vanessa, the consequences of her actions finally caught up with her. Word of her manipulations reached extended family and friends, and her carefully constructed image of control began to crumble. People began questioning her motives, her intentions, and her character. She tried to maintain a facade of charm, but the truth was too evident, too deeply rooted in the evidence left by her own actions. Daniel confronted her one final time, calmly but firmly. "I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. I cannot allow manipulation or deceit to influence my life anymore. Our family is not yours to control." Her response was weak, defensive, and ultimately futile. I watched from a distance, not with glee, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the truth had prevailed. Karma had acted not out of vengeance, but out of natural balance. In the weeks that followed, life began to regain its rhythm. Daniel and I became closer than ever. We celebrated small victories, shared meals without tension, and simply enjoyed being mother and son again. And I realized something profound. The pain, betrayal, and manipulation had not broken me. Instead, it had strengthened me, honed my patience, and reinforced the value of resilience, love, and integrity. I often reflect on those dark months, on the sleepless nights, the tears, and the heartache. And I realize that every challenge, every betrayal, and every attempt to turn my son against me was part of a larger lesson, not just for Vanessa, not just for Daniel, but for me as well. Life tests us in unexpected ways, often pushing us to the edge, forcing us to confront our vulnerabilities and our strength. The ultimate lesson I learned is simple, yet powerful. Love and truth endure. Manipulation and deceit eventually crumble, and patience is the most potent weapon of all. Daniel now knows, as I always did, that love cannot be forced, manipulated, or stolen. It is nurtured, protected, and respected. And I, as his mother, finally feel the peace and vindication I had longed for, not through revenge, but through endurance, clarity, and the quiet but relentless action of karma. As I sit here today, reflecting on everything, I feel a profound sense of closure. Vanessa's influence has faded. Daniel and I are stronger than ever, and the lessons learned during those difficult months have left me wiser and more resilient. I realize now that betrayal, no matter how painful, can ultimately lead to growth, self-respect, and deeper connections with those who truly matter. And so, I close this chapter of my life with a heart full of gratitude for the lessons, for the resilience, and most importantly, for the enduring bond between a mother and her son. Karma, as it always does, delivered its justice not with vengeance, but with the perfect, quiet, unyielding precision of truth.